So I saw this tweet by Ryan Saavedra. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Apologies, Ryan, if you end up watching this. But this tweet's got over 10,000 retweets, and he says, Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attacks Israel, calls them occupiers of Palestine. When pressed on what she meant, she struggled to give an answer and then admitted she does not know what she is talking about. Well, let's play this video and see exactly what Ryan is talking about, because look, it's got 1 million views.
But of course, the dynamic there in terms of geopolitics and the war in the Middle East is very different than people expressing their First Amendment right to protest.
Well, yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that to me is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also just, I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
So he said when pressed on what she meant, she struggled to give an answer and then admitted she does not know what she is talking about. Oh, come on. That's a little biased. I think her answer was weak. So I don't think Ryan's being entirely incorrect here. But she referenced the settlements, which is the West Bank. So there's a lot of Israeli settlements expanding into the West Bank, bulldozing homes, setting up new homes for Israeli settlers. So yeah, some people call that an occupation. And it spreads, and the West Bank is being basically overtaken. In which case, okay. And then she just says she's not an expert on the issue, but she says more. And so I think this is a bit disingenuous. Or what I should say is this is right-wing biased content coming from the Daily Wire, and it's what you should expect. Interestingly, though, from Forward. Now, I believe Forward is, it says quick reads through a Jewish lens, and they addressed this. I'm going to do a little bit here. We'll go to PBS. We're going to come back. It says, after drawing criticism during her primary campaign for her harsh statements about Israel, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told PBS on Friday that she's beginning to look at issues like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict differently. She tweeted, "This is a massacre. Democrats can't be silent about this anymore," in May after Israel killed 60 Gazans on the border. But appearing on the show Firing Line, Ocasio-Cortez's stance appeared to have softened. Okay, she said that she wrote that tweet as an activist and now promises to learn and evolve on the issue, admitting that she is not an expert on Middle East affairs. So what's interesting is that it kind of sucks that Ryan's going to frame Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's stance on this using a snippet out of context when Forward, which is a Jewish publication, acknowledges she's going to learn and evolve on the issue. So let me pull this up. I might skip ahead because I think this replays what we already listened to.
For me, the lens through which I saw this incident as an activist, as an organizer, if 60 people were killed in Ferguson, Missouri, if 60 people were killed in the South Bronx, unarmed, 60 people were killed in Puerto Rico, I just looked at that incident more through just as an incident. And to me, it would just be completely unacceptable if that happened on our shores. But
of course, the dynamic there in terms of geopolitics and the war in the Middle East is very different than people expressing their First Amendment right to protest.
Well, yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of
so I'm going to skip this part. She talks about the occupation.
Settlements that are increasing in some
right,
of these
I want to get to the
areas
end.
and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Oh, that's convenient.
Also just, I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue. For me, I'm a firm believer in finding a two-state solution in this issue, and I'm happy to sit down with leaders on both of these. For me, I just look at things through a human rights lens, and I may not use the right words. I know this is a
That's
very
honest. That's very honest, and you're going
issue.
to. I mean, it's very honest, and when you get to Washington and you're an elected member of Congress, you'll have the opportunity to talk to people on all sides and visit Israel and visit the West Bank. And
absolutely, and I think that's one of those things that's important too.
I just gotta say, I think the tweet's incorrect, and taken in its full context, she might not be the most knowledgeable. I absolutely pushes the pro-Palestinian rhetoric, but I don't think that was that much of a hot take. You listen to what she says, and she says the settlements. She says she's willing to sit down with people on both sides and better understand the issue. What I think's really interesting about this is I don't want to say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has become red-pilled on the issue. What I mean by red-pilled is often we refer to people on the far left as woke, and people who are like anti-SJW and right-wing as red-pilled. She is now moving her statements away. She called it an occupation, she called it a massacre, and now that she's an elected official, she's won the primary. She hasn't won the actual seat yet, but it's likely that she will. They're not going to have any real contest. But now that she's, primed to take this seat, her opinion starts to change, which is pretty interesting. And now back to this article from Forward, they mention that she says that she wrote the tweet as an activist and now promises to learn and evolve on the issue, admitting she is not an expert on Middle Eastern affairs. Is it safe to say that she has actually moved towards the right on the issue of Israel? And look, the issue of Israel is not really like a left-right thing, but the conservatives tend to support Israel, liberals tend to, be very critical of Israel. All in all, the Republicans and Democrats are fairly pro-Israel as a whole. It's the far left that is critical of it. It's very interesting because there is a disconnect between support for Israel in mainstream politics and far-left activism. And as you can see here, she wrote a tweet as an activist, but now that she's going into politics, she's going to evolve on the issue. Is it quite possible that Miss Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic socialist, far-left activist, is it possible that now that she's been elected, she's going to go to Washington, and Washington is going to stick infect her with the Washington disease, and she'll become one of them. It's almost like as soon as you get elected, you get bitten by a congressperson, and then you just turn into one, and your opinions align immediately. It's also fair to say that people are really divided on the issue of Israel and Palestine, whether or not Israel has a right to defend itself when people are, I don't know what you really call it, because the left is going to call it a protest, the right's going to call it like an incursion or a skirmish. But I don't think protest is fair simply because Israel and Palestine are two separate governmental entities. It's one thing if people in your country protest, then it's a protest. It's another thing if there's Palestine and Israel and they're at each other's borders and there's fighting. I think a lot of the issues when it comes to Israel-Palestine is basically coming down to the fact that Israel is more powerful because of their allies. And just because someone has power doesn't make them good or bad. So it's a very, very complicated issue. And that's why I'm not for or against. I do think it's fair to call out the settlements in the West Bank. I think most people recognize that as a violation of international law. And I think she was being fair when she brought it up. And if she wants to call it an occupation, I don't think that's unfair, but I do think it's a far left bias, right? I don't know what you'd really call it otherwise, but admittedly, I'm not a politician in office. I'm not an activist for the issue. I am definitely not an expert, which is what she said. I think she's being honest, but I'm fascinated by, now you have, fast forward a quick read through a Jewish lens, talking about how she's evolving. So is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just going to become another mainstream Democrat? That her positions are going to move in line with whatever she thinks is going to get her the most support? I'd be surprised if it was not the case, because politicians like getting reelected, and that means they have to dance the line over what is more socially acceptable than not. And most people would imagine that, posting things like this is a massacre and, writing as an activist might be a bit too extreme for the average voter. It might work in your district, but now you're playing American politics and you're going into Congress and things are going to be a bit different. They quote her more in depth. For me, the lens through which I saw this incident as an activist, as an organizer, if 60 people were killed in Ferguson, Missouri, if 60 people were killed in the South Bronx unarmed, 60 people were killed in Puerto Rico, it would just be completely unacceptable if this happened on our shores. It's always unacceptable. Doesn't matter where it is. Killing people is unacceptable. But you have to recognize that there's an actual conflict between Israel and Palestine, and that as much as Israel drone strikes Gaza and these areas of Palestine, there are people in Palestine who are firing rockets back into Israel. The power is disproportionate. But as I said, simply because one side is more powerful doesn't make either of them right. It's a conflict, and you're going to get into politics. And this is a really interesting test for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now that she's in the mainstream national public light, she's got to have her stance. And and it's going to be a big issue if you try moving into politics and you oppose Israel, because their lobby is very, very powerful. So it'll be fascinating to see if Ocasio-Cortez can maintain her far left activism and actually maintain herself as a socialist. I assure you, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to walk that back. I don't assure you, but I would be really interested to see what happens this November. Most people assume she's going to be uncontested, that the Republican opposition in her district is just they're not even fundraising, I believe. But because she is a socialist, I would be surprised if Republicans don't jump on that and even use her campaign against the Democrats in general. You know, there might be someone running for Congress somewhere else who might point out the Democrats are being overrun by socialists and use her as an example. Her campaign is a risk to other Democrats as well. And then you get people on the far left saying, no, we need to move further left, but we'll see if that's the case. Anyway, I mean, that's about it. The hot take is, in my opinion, a little unfair because I think Cortez is being reasonable. She's not an expert. She made activist posts, but it is interesting to see. What's more interesting than this hot take is that her opinions are evolving on the issue, which means I wouldn't be surprised if many far-left activists are now upset with her for backing down. Stick around, I'll have another video up in just a few minutes.